You're listening to WPVM LP Asheville 103.7, globally at WPVMFM.org. And this is the Home Business Success Show. Greetings and welcome to the Home Business Success Show. I'm your host, Hank Eder, also known as Hank the PR Guy. Folks who run home businesses have some great advantages over brick and mortar businesses, but they also face some unique challenges. As we speak with home business entrepreneurs on the show each week, we'll gain valuable insights on how to balance business and life and to share best practices for people who run home businesses. And sometimes we also get some real pearls of wisdom from our guests. My guest today, Chloe Kemp, is an award-winning writer, creative director, multimedia artist, and former editor-in-chief and publisher of an award-winning magazine. She is now a wisdom keeper, shamanic energy healer, and psychic who can foresee and interpret divine truth. Chloe moved to Mexico from Asheville, North Carolina, and continues her work there. Her new book is Wisdom Keeper, My Extraordinary Journey to Unlock the Sacred Within. Here's a brief description of the book. Psychic dreams and visions, remembering past lives, and becoming an intuitive shamanic healer. This is the story of an ordinary woman's extraordinary spiritual journey. With raw honesty, Chloe shares her story of awakening to her divine purpose, healing herself, and her journey to heal others. Wisdom Keeper reveals the divine pathway to a more peaceful, happy, fulfilled, and healthy life. Chloe's connections with spirit guides and other dimensions bring cosmic knowledge to her ancient wisdom. Her extraordinary journey is filled with miracles, visions, lucid and prophetic dreams, parallel universes, and knowledge of past lives. She healed herself from deeply embedded trauma, an incurable illness, and serious medical conditions. Chloe shares significant mystical experiences she had in Greece, Crete, France, Ecuador, Mexico, and Asheville, North Carolina, including an invitation to become a spiritual grandmother. She has performed intuitive shamanic healings and mediumship sessions in Ecuador, Mexico, and the United States. Welcome to the show, Chloe.
Thank you so much. And thanks for that great introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. You know, these are some very, very transitional times. So it brings me to the question, what inspired you to write this particular book at this particular time?
Great question. Well, I started having weird spiritual things happen when I was young, like a child, but I just kept thinking, well, that's not really anything. That can't be. So I just was in denial for a very long time. And when I moved to Asheville in 2007, everything exploded and went into warp speed. All my abilities, my healing abilities, psychic abilities, everything increased so much. And in 2010, this was really the crux of how this book came about. In 2010, I had a very intense vision dream about the pandemic. And what really startled me is I was working with a dream interpreter and I told her about my dream. And she said, there are people all over the country right now that are having the same dream. She said, they're not identical, but they all have three major components. They all have a worldwide disaster. They have martial law and, I just forgot the other one. Martial law and, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay.
I'll probably remember it later.
If you do, remind us. Yeah. I have those kind of moments all the time, and many of them happen right here on the show. So
yeah. Okay. So I just kind of sat with this vision dream for a long time. So in 2020, when COVID showed up, I'm like, oh my God, this is what my dream was about. This is happening. And I felt really guilty because I thought, well, I knew this. I knew something bad was coming that was going to affect the whole world. Why wasn't I able to stop it? And so my spirit guides told me in September of 2020 that it was time. It was time. Like, you need to write a book and you've got to tell everything that you know, because I haven't told anybody most of the things in my book. And so it was just like, it's time. You have to show people what's really happening. So that is why the book came about.
At that particular time. It's an interesting question you asked. Why wasn't I able to stop it? I mean, a lot of times, I can't say a lot of times, but many times we see things and we see things within, and we look at what could be a future. And sometimes I suspect that some of the things that I've seen maybe are the future, or maybe they're a potential future. And a lot of times I think that what we see as the future is predicated upon some of our actions and choices of today. And so that
Absolutely.
we sometimes see a future rather than the future. But
Right.
other times I think some events are so not defined, but they're just so impending that maybe there isn't a whole lot we can do about it except prepare ourselves.
Right. Well, you know what's interesting? I have a very deep relationship with my spirit guides. And I kept asking them in those 10 years, like, what, if you know this is happening and you're willing to help, like, why aren't you going to stop it? Why do we have to have this happen? Why do so many people have to suffer? And their answer was, on your planet, everybody has free will. We have to let people choose whether they wake up and choose a different future. But they kept telling me, you're not going to be able to stop it either. We're not stopping it, and you're not going to be able to. What your job is to help heal the world. And so I kept getting that message, but I still felt so guilty when COVID showed up. It's really pretty heartbroken that it was here and I'd seen it. So,
Yes,
yeah.
but if so many had seen it, it's not like the burden wasn't entirely on your shoulders to try to do
Absolutely.
something about
That
it.
just,
Sometimes we want to think of ourselves that way,
right,
but we're one part of a really giant picture,
right,
and our own outpicturing can affect the outcomes, and yet we need to get a lot of like-minded souls into this particular vision or dream or mindset in order to really affect that kind of change. Individually, and things I say are just my own beliefs, but I think
right,
individually we can affect great change in our own lives. But
right,
individually, we don't affect such great change on the world unless
right.
we're one of these. And I'm digressing a little bit. I've always looked at certain individuals historically as what I call having pivotal karma, basically.
Right.
And there's these, most of us, we live our lives and we affect the people who are in our inner circles and our friends and our families and maybe in our organizations. But there's people who are so tied into the doings and the beings of the world that their choices affect a lot of people. We have really positive examples of that. People like Mohandas Gandhi, who went out and effected great change in the world. In fact, we always remember him as saying, be the change you want to see.
Exactly.
And then we have really negative examples of that.
Right.
People like Adolf Hitler, who
Right.
affected millions upon millions of people. And what's always struck me is that it's so much easier for history to remember the negative examples.
Exactly. Right.
Yes, because you
Yeah.
can see destruction, but how do you see spiritual transformation?
Which is why, I mean, that brings us back to why I wrote the book, because I obviously had to accept the fact that is not my job to stop it. It wasn't. I didn't stop it. Neither did the other dimensions that knew it was coming. Nobody stopped it. And so I've just embraced, all right, then it's here. And what you need to do is help wake people up. That's
Okay.
where change is going to happen. So that's really why I committed to the book.
Yeah. So then I got to start delving into that book because
Yeah.
it sounds like there's a lot of really good transformational ideas and methods and techniques within that book. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So can you tell me about some of your own experiences with first, I suppose, with your own healing and then healing experiences that maybe you've had that you've been able to help others facilitate?
Yeah, I've had a lot of miracles, a lot of healing miracles. I've had 4 times doctors thought I had cancer, and I did alternative healing work, and every single time the tumors disappeared.
That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And then probably my most amazing healing experience, I was very, very sick and very disabled with multiple sclerosis for 14 years. I mean, it was bad. I could barely function. I had to have an assistant to help me. And the way I looked at that when I got the diagnosis was, okay, this is here for lessons. This is here to teach me something. And I'm determined to learn my lessons from it. And then I also let the universe know, if it's my destiny, if you've decided I need to have multiple sclerosis for the rest of this lifetime, then I'll accept that. But in the meantime, I'm going to work on what the lessons are, because there is no cure for it. And so in Mexico, I was living in San Miguel in 2018, and a shamanic curandero I worked with for several months, he completely removed the multiple sclerosis, just completely. So I haven't had any problems in 4 years, which is, it's a huge miracle. There is literally no cure for it. And I just was struggling so much. And now it's amazing. Like the people that I know in Mexico are like, oh yeah, right. Like you were really sick. Cause I'm like vibrant. I'm active. I've been working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week with no problems. And there's no way I could have done that if I still had MS. I wouldn't have even had the brain power to write. It just wouldn't have happened. So that was probably, I consider my biggest miracle. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. When you say he removed the multiple sclerosis, do you believe that he was a channel for something that worked for you, that removed the multiple sclerosis, rather than he saying, I'm putting my hands on you and I'm taking this from you?
No, a good healer, a good alternative healer, they're a vessel, and they know they are. They don't show up with a big ego like, hey, I can remove that. They're just a vessel, and they work with their own spirit guides. And he has a really interesting technique. When you go to him and you tell him, this is what I'd like to work on, and this is when he was doing in person. Now he just is remote because of COVID, but in person, he would say, well, then let me get you laid down on my table. And I just want to talk to your soul and your heart and your spirit guides. And then I'll let you know if I can do it, which is very cool. I think that he's very humble about, I don't know, it's not my decision. It's the spirit world's decision if we're going to be able to do this. So fortunately, they agreed. It was okay. Yeah.
Fortunately, and you look very vibrant and you sound very sharp. So there's nothing wrong with your mind. And so that's awesome.
And it was, sometimes I could barely talk. The MS was so bad. It affected my cognitive abilities and speaking abilities a lot. So yeah, it's a drastic change.
So over time, you yourself have developed this tendency, not a tendency, but basically some healing abilities. You've developed some healing abilities. And can you tell me a little bit about some of the things that you do and who might look to you for something like that?
Right. My abilities to heal came from my spirit guides and from my memories of being a healer in past lives. I didn't go anywhere to do any kind of training. It just showed up in Asheville, like 1 year after I moved, when everything was just so explosive with my spiritual growth. I started remembering so many things that I used to do in other lives. So that's why I call it intuitive shamanic energy work, because that's pretty much what it is. You know, I literally, my spirit guides are there every session, and they are guiding me every step of the way, like where to put my hands, exactly what to do. They're the ones who let me know there's a past life that's affecting this person. And that was an interesting ability. I was shocked. I was working, just doing regular healing. And I was working on a client, and I started looking at and remembering a past life where she had been murdered. And I ended up going through it for her, almost like a surrogate, like, okay, I'll be your death surrogate. I don't want you to have to re-experience it, but I will, so we can clear the energy that's still there. And this woman, I kept being told by my guides to keep my hand on her belly. And I was arguing a little bit, like, come on, this is a long session. Really? She shouldn't have it anywhere else. She needs my help. And so I just finally said, okay. Anyway, it turned out after the session, when we talked, she said, I can't believe I let you have your hand on my belly that whole time. And she said, I've never, this lifetime, not even my husband, no one has touched my belly. No one. I said, well, I can tell you why. You were stabbed 20 times in the belly in an ancient Egyptian temple. I'm sure that that's where that tendency came from. And then she let me know afterwards, it was gone. Just, there was never an issue after our session with anybody being around her belly. So yeah, but the past lives, I think, are very important. Some healers don't think they are, but it's just like, it's pieces of the puzzle, because we're here in this lifetime, but we're carrying a lot of things that we've experienced in maybe other dimensions and other lives. And so I think it's really valuable to be able to go back and revisit some past lives and see what might still be bothering you this lifetime. Like, because we do tend to, if there's trauma, we tend to take it with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You ever hear the Indigo Girls? You know who they are, the Indigo Girls?
Yeah.
They have a song called Galileo. And one of the lyrics, think about my fear of motion, which I really can't explain. Some little fool across the ocean must have crashed his little airplane. She's talking about past lives, you know.
Exactly.
It's a great song. You had to
Right.
mention reincarnation over a couple of beers the other night, you know.
Right.
So now she's being driven kind of crazy with this notion that there's a lot that she can't explain or understand. Not only that, but it's a really catchy tune. If you haven't heard
Right.
it, look up
Yeah.
Galileo from the Indigo
Right.
Girls. Great
Yeah.
song.
So I also, with my healing, I use crystals. I use music, and healing touch. And it's really, every session is different. I mean, I don't start a session with anything in mind. It's not like, okay, you signed up for a past life reading. That's not how I work. We set our intentions, we say a prayer, and then we start the process, and I just wait for my guidance. I have no idea what's going to come up.
Mm-hmm. And in that same vein, I would say that you'd never approach any of this from a disease point of view. Like, somebody can't come to you and say, you know, I have XYZ disease and I want you to heal that. You don't actually approach it from I'm diagnosing or curing a specific disease, but we're looking at you as body, mind, and soul, and seeing if we can clear out some of the energetic blockages maybe that are leading you to have, you know, dis-ease.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I make sure that my clients know we're going to do whatever the spirit guides want us to do today. There's, you know, and maybe if somebody has an illness like me, I felt like my MS, obviously I had 14 years of lessons, but I explained to them, like, I'm not going to try to interfere with your divine plan. And if your divine plan is you're supposed to have it, then we can look at, maybe I can help you with your lessons, like, what it's bringing to you to teach you. But yeah, I'm very open to wherever the healing journey takes us, very open to that.
Right. And I suppose many times it takes you to places that you really hadn't expected, and that sometimes the solution might be something way out there in left field that you never even thought would be.
Absolutely. Yes. So it's an interesting experience for me too, because, wherever their guides or want them to go, I'm going. So yeah, it's an interesting process. Yeah.
Well, I recall you saying that no one knew your whole story until you wrote this book. How has that been, to jump from telling no one to telling the whole world about your experiences?
I think it's good that I had almost 2 years. I started in the fall of 2020 to prepare, because when at the beginning, I was very nervous. Very nervous. Like, what? You haven't even told your friends. Like, why are you just going to announce the whole world? Like, you skipped a lot of steps here. So it was just a matter. A lot of my friends really helped me work through it, on just being very supportive and encouraging me to just trust the process. Don't worry about the skeptics. My book, my healing techniques, they're not for everybody. I totally know that. And so I just have had to remind myself, it's totally okay. Plenty of people are going to think that your book isn't for them, and that's okay. But I just had the book launch here in Mexico last Friday. And up until then, I still was nervous. And it was awesome, because literally everybody that came was totally invested into the subject of the book. We had a fantastic question and answer. I'm like, okay, then that's spirit saying it's going to be fine. It doesn't matter who doesn't like it. What's important is, who are you helping? So that's where I got to that place.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that, when I was in college, I was very enamored of the Carlos Castaneda works. I was
Love that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, God.
Well, Carlos once was criticized by somebody who said, you're revealing all this stuff, and some of this stuff shouldn't be revealed. This should be secret. And Carlos said he took it back to his mentor, and whom in the book was called Don Juan, but, we don't know who he really was. But Carlos once said, it doesn't matter if he exists, the teachings exist. But he goes back to his mentor and says, I'm being criticized for revealing things that people say shouldn't be revealed, that they're secrets. And Don Juan is reported to have said, I could reveal to you right now the most important and profound secret in the entire universe. But if you are spiritually not ready to do anything with that information, your life won't be one iota different than it was before you heard that.
That's so true. Well, you know what? When I was living in San Miguel in 2018, there was a shaman. They call them Pagos. Who's from the Andes Quero Nation. And they've been so protective of their society and their beliefs that they didn't even let anybody that was not a part of their tribe come to their village until 1996, which is just amazing. And so he came to San Miguel to do some healing work. And I had something called a Carpe blessing. And it's interesting. It's just been recently in the last several years that, because their tribe, they're like the original, they descended from the Incas. They're like a big deal in South America and in Peru. And he said that they decided it's time. Our world is really messed up. And they said, we have to start sharing it with the whole world. We have to start sharing our knowledge and our healing and everything now. And so I think that's what's changing. This is, Carlos Castaneda was a long time ago. Our world's in crisis. And I'm really happy that the indigenous tribes like the Quero Nation are saying, no more secrets. we need to do our best to spread this world in, this knowledge. So that was pretty awesome. I had 2 sessions with him when he was there in San Miguel.
Does he work through an interpreter?
He had, yes, so they had an interpreter from his village, and then the interpreter also was able to speak Spanish. So then she spoke Spanish. So yeah, it was 2-pronged interpretation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, with this book that's out now at this particular time, and as you were guided to bring it out at this particular time, what is it that you're hoping to achieve with this book?
Well, honestly, I want to heal the world. I mean, in just a simple, that's what I want to do. That's what I feel called to do that. And so my goal, literally, it's to get the information out. And then some of the healers that I've mentioned in the book that I've worked with, we're going to be doing webinars to teach the principles of the book. My personal goal is to reach as many people as possible and help them wake up and help them get plugged back into their spiritual side. Because I think that's the only way the world is going to change. I have given up. I used to be very political. I've given up on that. That is not going to do lasting change. It's not for anybody, not just the US. That is not how this is going to work. I mean, it's really going to take a major transformation, which in my belief is spiritual. And so that's why I'm devoting my whole life to this. I mean, literally the last 2 years, I've been a hermit. This is what I've been working on, and I will continue working on it until we get to a certain point. So I don't know if you were going to ask me, but it kind of leads into, I wrote a whole chapter about the connection to millennials, Generation Z and alphas to healing the world. And it was interesting when I first started writing the book, I kept thinking, well, those age groups are going to be a big part of this book. But then I'm like, well, how or why? You're almost 70. Like, why are they going to pay attention to anything you say? But I just kept, I don't question, well, maybe I question my spirit guides, but I just keep going. Even if I don't understand, I'm like, okay, all right. And it was actually my son, who is a millennial. And I was telling him this, and he went, Mom, all of my friends and me are having so many crazy spiritual things happen. We need your book. We need your honesty, because we don't understand what we're being asked to do. And this is perfect timing. And so then is when I realized not all of them, but a lot of the millennials, Generation Z and alphas came in as star children. They are from somewhere else. And they came specifically, they agreed to show up now in this world. They knew this was going to happen. They knew it. And their whole program, if they're a star child, their whole being is set to change and heal the world. That's their mission. That's why they came here. And so what's been interesting for me, so that's why I had to write the whole chapter. I'm like, I need to explain to them, to those age groups, why they are important right now to helping the world. I mean, everybody is, but they literally came here knowing. And so it's been interesting. When I've met millennials here in Mexico, it only takes a second and their light switch goes on. It's just, you can, because they start out like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And then just a short little conversation, and they're like in. I can see it. I can see their soul is like, yes, that sounds familiar. At my event, there was a filmmaker and some musicians that were in their 20s that came to do the event. And I didn't expect this because, they were kind of like the hired people, but they came out to me after the event and said, I need your book. I need to read it. And the musician, like the next morning, was like, I'm having problems. I need to start reading it like right now. Can you help me? So that's been the experience with anybody in that age group that I've met. They know with just a little help, they're like, oh, that's why I'm here. So
that's a sometimes maligned group here in the United States. And I think it's because, there's kind of like a gulf between the way sometimes the older folks understand things and the way they understand things. But I also suspect that those of the millennials, at one time I think they were called indigo children and
They are.
Crystal children.
Right.
I think some of them who have not had the opportunity to find the transformation and really open up to who they are, perhaps are hiding behind whatever they can because of the harshness of the reality around them.
Yes. I think they have a hard time. In fact, the crystals, a lot of them are autistic. Mm-hmm. Because they just, so there's indigos, which are millennials, crystals are Generation Z, and alphas are rainbows. And each of them that are coming in are more ingrained with other dimensions. And so it's very confusing to them. In fact, the young people I've talked to, one of their first questions is, when did you know you were different? I'm like, when I was a kid. And they all have the same experience. And I said, I remember as a child wondering how I got here with this family, because I knew the family they were not my peeps. I mean, literally I was born in that family, but they're not where I'm from. And so when I share that, a lot of these young people are like, oh my God, that's exactly how I felt when I was a kid. So it's exciting. I mean, we're all going to help heal the world. We all are. But they're going to be like the army. I mean, and not that it's going to be a fight, a battle, but it's spiritual work. They're the ones who are going to take the lead.
Like an army of light, so to speak.
Exactly. And what's interesting? Clearly, I'm so much older than somebody in their 20s. And I just can tell, like, in their mind, there's no age difference, because we're talking soul to soul. We're not talking like, oh, there you are in your body, and this is how old you are. We're communicating soul to soul. And so I've kind of gotten over that, like, well, who's going to follow you if you're 70? And I realized they recognize I have something for them. So
they'll recognize the authenticity, which is one of the things about them. They don't harbor phoniness very well. But before we continue that, I just want to remind our listeners, you're listening to WPVM LP Asheville 103.7, globally at WPVMFM.org. And this is the Home Business Success Show. I'm your host, Hank Eder. My guest is spiritual author Chloe Kemp. So we were saying that these children, I mean, many of them aren't children anymore,
right?
But these particular age groups, they see phoniness from, miles away, and they just can't, they can't harbor it. They can't respect it. They can't be a part of it, even if it means they will alienate themselves from those who are not authentic.
Right.
So, the authenticity has to be there. Chloe, many say this is a time of great spiritual awakening, and spiritual awakening can be deeply transformative and empowering, but may seem at first confusing or unsettling to people in the process of their own inner change. How can people begin to adapt to the swift changes in consciousness that maybe they're already feeling or that are coming up?
Well, that's another big reason I'm writing the book, or I've written the book, and I'm going to be doing webinars, because I want to reach people on all levels. I want to reach the person who's never even thought about awakening. It's not even in their radar. I want to reach them. I also want to reach people like you're talking about, people who are having strange things happen and don't understand what they are or what they're supposed to do with them. I want to be the guide on every step of somebody's awakening journey. Because if you don't know what's happening, it can be a little frightening. Or for me, I kept just blowing it off, going, well, that's coincidence, or like, well, you're just imagining that. So I spent years and years and years denying it. And so I want to help people so they don't get stuck like I did, just pretending like, oh, this is all random, because it's not random. So just knowing, just maybe for people right now, just to know it might be a bumpy journey. It might be. It's not necessarily smooth, easy, and quick. It definitely isn't. But you know what helps? The more you surrender, the easier it gets. And I don't know if that sounds like it contradicts, but sometimes you just have to have faith and surrender, even if you're not there yet on, I believe this, I accept it. Just trust. Just sit in a place of trust. I know this seems really strange and very far out, but I'm just going to sit with it and I'm just going to see what happens. That's been very helpful for me when new things showed up. That's exactly what I did. Didn't understand them, but I'm like, okay, well, it is happening. So I'm just going to watch it, observe it, meditate, see what else shows up.
So it's kind of like an openness of expectation. You don't necessarily, or people in general, we don't necessarily believe something immediately at face value, but if we're open enough to at least entertain the possibility, okay, I've had this experience. I'm not going crazy. I didn't take psychotropic or psychedelic drugs to do it.
Right.
I didn't ingest any mushrooms. I mean, but I'm having these experiences. So maybe maybe if I'm not insane, maybe something unique and interesting is happening, and maybe I'm transforming. I think that's kind of like a positive expectancy, and like you say, sit with it and surrender to it and see what happens.
Right, and find somebody you can talk to. I didn't have that many people I could talk to when my weird stuff was happening. I really didn't, but I think it's always helpful if you can find another spirit who's similar to your wavelength. It can help so much just to kind of compare notes. Have you had this happen before? No, but I had this happen. It just starts building on your awareness, and you become more comfortable with, okay, so there are weird things happening. All right. You don't feel like you have to do anything. You're just like, okay, you just acknowledge, okay, weird things are happening. A lot of the stuff that happened to me in Asheville during this period of 2008 through 2010 or 2012 was really intense. And I didn't realize at the time, but I met a woman in Oaxaca in 2020 who was writing a book. She was from the United States. She was a college professor. She was writing a book about shamanism in Mexico. She asked to interview me, which I thought she was just going to ask me my experience as a shaman. She went, oh God, no, you're clearly a shaman. I want to know your experiences. So I started telling her about all these crazy things that showed up in my life. And she knew all of them. She said, oh my God, that, there were some things I didn't even understand how they happened. Like one thing that happened to me when people would talk, not all the time, but like a person might say something and there would just be this moment, I would go, say that again, say that again. I'd have them repeated about 6 times. And then I started seeing visions, like I'm fully awake. And it was like I was watching a movie. So I was telling this professor about this and she went, it's the tone. It wasn't at all the words they said. It was the tone. And she said, most shamans have to train for years to learn how to do that. I said, well, obviously I knew it from another past life, but it was weird when it showed up here because I didn't know what was going on. And I have had vision dreams my whole life. Never had I had a vision when I was wide awake, like I was watching a movie. So
by the tone, you mean the frequency of what's being shared then moves you into
their tone, their voice, what I heard wasn't the words. And I didn't know. That's why I kept saying, repeat it again. But I wasn't trying, when I was saying that, I wasn't trying to remember what they said. I just knew I needed to keep hearing them say the same words over and over again. And then it just would open up like a movie. So,
yeah. So
sometimes like things like that happen and you don't understand. So I didn't know. That started happening to me in 2009. I didn't find out the answer until 2020, but I was okay. I just like, okay, I don't know how or why, but I'm able to do this now. So it was kind of fun for her to shed some light and go, oh yeah. That's a normal thing that shamans train to do.
Cool. When you say find someone to share it with who's, maybe of a similar wavelength, and I think that's very important because you have to be careful, I think, with who you share it with, because like if you share it, you go to the doctor and you share something like that, they're going to put you on some kind of a mood changing drug or some kind of a antidepressant.
Put you in a psychiatric hospital. Yes.
Yeah, they
absolutely.
might do that. And if you tell it to a priest or a minister, they're going to interpret it from their perspective.
They're going to be worried that you're possessed with the devil.
Right. Yeah. I've known a few people who have tried to share spiritual experiences with clergy and were told, don't go there. That's the devil. Just stay away from that, And
no, you need to find people who are on a spiritual path. If you're going to have things like that you want to share. And honestly, that was part of my hesitation and I pleaded and argued a little bit with the spirit guides. In fact, literally for a month, I tried to convince them what I really should do is write it as a fiction book. I promise you I'll tell everything. I just won't say it was me. Is that okay? And they were like not happy with that idea. And then my shaman that's from here in Mexico, I talked to him about that idea and he went, you have to be brave right now. Your story is so powerful. You have to own it. It is not a fiction story. Don't go there. So, but exactly what you're saying is why I'm like, oh my God, if those kind of people read the book, they're going to have a target on me, but hopefully they won't read the book.
Well, they'll probably ignore it. They'll look at it and say,
exactly.
This is,
she's one of those new age people.
Yeah, exactly. And that's even a loaded term. I mean, there's a lot of baggage along with that term.
Right.
Yeah. But that being said, you mentioned dreams a little while ago. Are dreams tied into someone's inner changes?
I don't quite understand what you mean by that, by inner changes. Tell me more.
Well, they're going through spiritual transformation, and could perhaps sometimes the dreams be a preface to that? They might experience things in the dream state that they haven't experienced in the physical state. And sometimes could that be a bridge to some of the things that they might be about to experience?
It can be that. It can also, dreams can bring forth memories of things you have done in past lives that you wouldn't even consider that you would know how to do here or now in this lifetime. I think dreams definitely can foretell the future. Absolutely. Not everyone. My spirit guides are nice enough to tell me when I've had a particularly strong dream. They'll tell me, like, pay attention. This one was a vision dream. Pay attention. Don't go back to sleep until you're clear what the message is, because this is a message vision dream. But so they can give you ideas about the future. I've had dreams in parallel universes where the minute I saw this, like a certain place, I'm like, oh my God, I've lived there before. This is not just like a made up place. So that's what happened in Crete. A lot of things happened in Greece and Crete, but one of the things that happened, I had a lot of spiritual things happen in Crete. So I thought, okay, well, now I'll just relax. I'm on vacation now because I think I saw everything I needed to see. And so I was taking a bus in the mountains to a dinner. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, this is from the dream I had that I felt in my dream. It was from a parallel universe. It was exactly how the mountains in Crete looked. Exactly. And what was interesting, so there's a archaeological site in Crete that's one of the most famous in the world. And turns out the women were very important. There were a lot of goddesses and they had a lot of power. And so I also went to the museum, and women were just draped with snakes everywhere. I mean, snake bracelets and just around their necks. It's just, snakes were a huge thing. Well, in that dream, snakes were everywhere. I mean, everywhere, just everywhere. And so when I was in the bus, I'm like, oh my God, this is the dream. I mean, this is what I saw. And I knew the minute I arrived in Crete, I'm like, oh God, yeah, I've lived here. Absolutely. It's so familiar. So
I don't want to take up much time with this, but I just want to share this When I was 19, I was home from college for the summer, and I lived in Miami Beach at the time. I was brought up in Miami Beach, which was a story in itself. But one night I went to sleep and I had this incredibly vivid dream of being on a starship and having this incredible relationship with this beautiful alien woman. It was just the most amazing thing. And in the morning, I opened my eyes from the dream and looked around, and I wanted to scream because I wasn't on the starship anymore. And even though I had, a very warm and loving and beautiful girlfriend at the time, I was basically mourning that I was not going to see this alien that I made such a deep connection with, and that life of how it would be on the starship.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, very good chance that dream was from a past life.
I don't
no,
have
very,
any,
very good chance. Very good chance.
I don't have any doubt about that.
Yeah.
On a more personal note, we would love for you to share a little bit about your move to Mexico.
Well, when I was young, I've always been interested in other cultures. I always loved to travel. And I almost moved to Mexico in my 30s and got pregnant. So I'm like, I don't know about raising a kid there. I'll just put that on the back burner. So on my 60th birthday, I'm like, you know what? It's not too late. And I was still sick. I was still very sick at 60 with MS. But I was just like, I still want to do that. And I was so sick. I thought, well, why is it? I mean, it'll be hard on me to make the move, but if you're going to be sick, why not be sick in a country where you want to live, instead of here? I said, I didn't want to live in the States anymore. So that's what happened. And then I spent 3 years traveling to all over the world to figure out where I wanted to live. And then what a blessing that Eduardo, my shaman here in Mexico, was able to completely remove the MS in 2018, which made such a difference. It would have been very hard on me to make this kind of move if I'd still been sick, very hard. So, but I did it. I did it. I moved, sold everything in Asheville back in 2019, and then moved to Mexico January 2020. And of course, COVID happened shortly after that, but I'm still glad I'm here.
That was like ground zero, January 2020. Yeah. What was it like? How has it been to write, publish, and market a new book while living in Mexico?
Well, we do have COVID, so we still take precautions. And so it's almost like I could have been living anywhere, because literally, I'm not exaggerating when I said I was working 12 hours a day. So I have been kind of living, eating, breathing the book. So the nice thing is when I take a break, I'm like, yay, I'm still in Mexico. I'm so happy I'm here. But then the last 2 years, I've not done a lot of socializing or things like that because I've been so busy with the book. But I've had a learning curve because, in the States, it's very easy to get electronics and all that. It's not here. Plus it's really expensive. My computer broke. And even though I love my iPad, I'm like, oh, hell no, I'm not writing an entire book on an iPad. I'm not going to do that. So it was complicated there's times when there are things that are just very hard to get here. And so you have to figure out a way usually to get it from the States.
Are you out in the country kind of in Mexico, or are you in one of the cities?
I'm in a city. It's a small town, but it's interesting. The population's similar to Asheville, but this feels like a much smaller town. It's just, it's a pueblo. It's like a little village. I mean, it's bigger than a tiny little village, but it really doesn't matter where you live. You can even live in Mexico City. It's still going to be a problem getting things. And it's almost impossible to trust getting something shipped. It took my book distributor in the US a month for me to get the proof of my book, a month. And a lot of times things they just never show up. You have something shipped from the US, they never show up. So that's been interesting. I needed to build a website. Okay. Cause I was sick for 14 years and then I've been traveling. So I'm so out of the loop on business stuff, just totally out of the loop. So certainly I didn't have a website. I mean, now I'm like it's kind of crazy at 70. Now I'm doing a whole branding at 70. But I had to get somebody to help me build a website. He's actually from Mexico, but lived in the States, and he's bilingual. So it was really helpful. But there's just things like that you can get at your fingertips in the US that you cannot get here. You have to be more patient here. You have to dig a little deeper when you need resources that aren't easy to find. So that's been a challenge.
I bet one of the upsides is that the food is probably really good in that place that you're living.
I love Mexican food. I
do too.
Food. Yeah.
But see, we Americans don't really always know Mexican food. I mean, we think we do, but what we know is Tex-Mex. But there's stuff down there that's so much different and so much better. Yeah. But in the time we've got, let's not go there.
Okay.
Do you have any special routines that kept you focused on your book in Mexico that maybe are even going to be of help to other writers who, wherever they are, they're trying to write their books, but they need to focus in on really making it happen?
Well, fortunately, I had no distractions. You know, my son is grown. I'm not working. So that helped tremendously. And I just was committed. My friends got a little frustrated because I literally never, when I was writing, I never met with anybody earlier than 4 p.m. because I usually get up at 4. And so I have a long day. And then, you know, by 4, my brain is just tired. And so that was when I would socialize. But I was very, very disciplined. And I think it's because this is a spiritual mission. I'm just not writing a book because, I always wanted to write a book. I'm on a mission, which made it easier to be disciplined every day because I needed to focus. Yeah.
So you would say that the things that you might tell another writer would be discipline and freedom from distractions. I'm sure you know who Isaac Asimov is. He was a science fiction writer, but he was also a science writer, and he's written hundreds and hundreds of books. And someone asked him, "How have you done that?" And he said, "Well, you know, I treat it like a business. I get up, you know, I have breakfast at 8 o'clock. 9 to noon, I'm writing. I have lunch, and then 1 to 5, I'm writing, and then I go about my evening." But he said, I put that kind of time and energy into it because this is my passion. This is my business. And what he accomplished through that kind of discipline was totally amazing.
Right.
Yeah. Would you say there are challenges running a home-based business from Mexico?
The challenge is kind of what I said, like there's lack of supplies. Sometimes there's something critical that you really need. When I realized how difficult it was going to be to get my books from the US, I made an arrangement with a Mexican printer and from Mexico City to print some books for me here that I'll have here for events. So you adapt. You're like, most of the time, for me, I didn't get my first choice. So you just like, okay, so what's another solution? So you just kind of go with the flow. I feel so blessed to be living in Mexico that I really don't care about these little inconveniences. I don't. It's been interesting. I haven't wanted to travel because of COVID. So I do need to get to the States, especially Asheville, because a lot of the book happened in Asheville. But I'm just going with the flow on that too. I'm like, okay, when I feel comfortable going, then I will. And otherwise I'll try to do, things online. So.
Yeah. So then home business from Mexico is very much like a home business anywhere else, as long as you can get the things that you need in order to make it happen. Like you mentioned your computer and you had some trouble with that. I guess the same kind of thing can happen in small towns. When I first moved to Mars Hill, which is only 25 minutes from downtown Asheville. Yeah. Well, when we first moved here 16 years ago, the only internet I could get was HughesNet satellite.
Right.
And that was a kind of a nightmare. And then over time that evolved to Country Cablevision. And then that evolved to the local electric company got a grant from the United States government to bring the highest, most incredible high-speed internet to rural areas. And I have internet service now that, that rivals you can get in a place like New York City.
Right.
But yeah, you have to make
Well,
these kind of adjustments.
yeah. Internet is an issue. We just, we don't have as much sophistication with technology as a country like the States. But the internet here is really cheap. So I use two different companies. I live in a 2-story house. And so I have one internet company I'm hooked up to upstairs, and a different internet company I'm hooked to downstairs. A lot of people end up getting two internets just because you have a better chance. At least one of them will be working because we do have times when the internet doesn't work, but it's just like so cheap. It's no big deal to pay for two services. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember being, I don't know, I can't say I was officially in Mexico. I was in Tijuana in the 80s. It's Baja California, but it is officially part of Mexico.
Right.
And I needed a little medication for one of my fingers because I had an issue with it. And I went to a little pharmacy. There was a doctor who was involved on the business that we were doing, and he wrote me a little prescription to something I could get. And I went to the pharmacy, and he said, that's going to be like, I don't remember, something like 17,000 pesos. And I'm thinking, wow, am I carrying that kind of money? But in 1984 or 85, when I was there, 17,000 pesos was maybe $4 US. It was just amazing.
Oh, no, 17,000 pesos. No, the value's changed. Yeah.
Yeah, things change over the years.
Yeah, medicine's still so cheap. And you can go to the pharmacy. You don't even have to have a doctor. You can go to the pharmacy and get almost anything. And it's very, very inexpensive. It's very reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would think that's one of the real upsides, aside from the peace and quiet that you get of living in a place like that. Is there anything I haven't brought up that you'd really like to share about your book and about what you do?
Well, the book's available in paperback and ebook on the main outlets that everybody knows: Amazon, Apple, Kobo, Barnes and Noble, and one more. I'm sorry, company.
That's okay.
Remember your name. Okay. But it's easy to find. I have a website that has a lot more information about many things, not just the book. It's Chloe Kemp Wisdom Builder. Wisdomkeeper.com. Chloe Kemp Wisdomkeeper.com. That would give a lot of information. But I think my last message that I want to give is it's so important right now that people wake up. It is so important. And I'm going to do whatever I can to help make that happen. So that's why the book's out. That's why I'm going to do classes. That's why I'm going to do webinars. That's why I talk to strangers on the street, because you never know who's ready. You don't know who's right. And it's always fun to get those people who just immediately their light switch goes on.
That's very cool. So you said Chloe Kemp Wisdomkeeper.com.
Yes.
Is where people can find more information.
Yes.
And is there on that site a way of sending messages to you, to send you email? Is there an email address there?
And I do have they can register for a Wisdom newsletter, subscribe to the Wisdom newsletter. And that also gets them, I'm doing a drawing for people who have subscribed to get a free ebook. So yeah, they can do that. But you have the convenience on a website of talking about lots of different things. So it's pretty comprehensive.
Very, very cool. Well, I thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing these things. And I hope that our listeners, I know that I have a lot of people in our listening audience that even though they are home business entrepreneurs, a lot of them have spiritual tendencies and are going through their own awakenings. For our listeners, thanks for tuning in with us today. Before I sign off, I'd like to say that there are some great resources available for people who run home businesses, including an online community of like-minded home business entrepreneurs, the Home Business Success Community. If you'd like more information about that, you can drop me an email at hank@hankeater.com. Thanks for being here. We're back every Friday at 10 a.m. on WPVM FM 103.7 Asheville and on the web globally at WPVMFM.org. And here's wishing all of you a fabulous day of home business success.